to start recording. And I'm sure some more folks will trickle in, so feel free to continue to let people in. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join this evening for the third public meeting for the Mystic Lakes Path Improvement Project. We are so delighted to have you here today, where we are going to be presenting the refined concepts for the project. To get going and share an agenda for this evening, we will be sharing brief Zoom instructions and an overview of the project. We will then continue on to share work that we've completed to date before diving into the refined conceptual design that we've prepared. After that, we will share ongoing next steps and also close this evening with any Q&A, questions and answers, and discussion for folks. Just a few Zoom meeting info and tips. Controls are at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording this evening. We will be recording the meeting this evening and posting it on our project webpage for those who were unable to join. If you would prefer not to be recorded during the meeting, please just turn off your video and microphone at all times. We do want to make sure there's a pleasant experience for all, so we're going to be doing our best to moderate who is muted and unmuted so that everyone can fully grasp the information we're sharing this evening. However, if at any point in time you find yourself unmuted with a lot of background noise, please do mute. If not, we may mute you. The symbols at the bottom of the screen do activate different features. The closed caption features I've found to be very helpful during webinars. I'll do my best to enunciate so the closed captioning can capture my voice. And it's just really helpful in case you miss some words or some information along the way. We will be taking in written comments and questions throughout the meeting, and we'll be stopping at different portions to answer any written questions and comments that help to clarify information in the presentation for meeting attendees. If you would like to submit those written questions, please use the chat function. And please do try your best to address those questions to my great colleague, Isaiah Johnson. If not, we'll just need to forward those questions along to Isaiah because he'll be the moderator for those. Lastly, if you are joining this evening by phone, you can use the hand raise function during our Q&A discussion section at the very end of the presentation by pressing *9 in order to be waited and called upon. So this meeting tonight and the convener of tonight's meeting is the Mystic River Watershed Association. We are conducting this work with landowner permission from the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. Our mission is to protect and restore the Mystic River and its tributaries. Within that, our Mystic Greenways program vision is to connect 25 miles of path, improve hundreds of acres of parklands, and engage thousands of community members from the Mystic Lakes to the Boston Harbor. We wish to honor and acknowledge the indigenous communities native to this region in its past, present, and future. The watershed is on the colonized lands of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, and Pawtucket tribes. As you explore the watershed, we encourage you to learn with us about its past and current indigenous heritage. We take a lot of pride in continuing to learn in this space as well. The project team who's joining here this evening and folks, sub-consultants who have helped along the way includes the Mystic River Watershed Association. My name is Carl Alexander, and I serve as the Greenways Program Manager for MIRA. And I'll turn things over to my colleague Isaiah to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Isaiah Johnson. I am the Outreach and Media Manager for the Mystic River Watershed Association, and I have been helping support outreach for this project.
And I am Rachel Fisher. I am a Greenways Fellow with MIRA for the summer, and I will be doing asset management along the river and assessing current status of things.
Bob?
I'm Bob Eulig with Halverson Tie and Bond Studio, and I'm the project director. Iris?
Hi, I'm Iris Lin. I'm a senior landscape architect from Harvardson Time Bond Studio. I'm the project manager.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Choi, a landscape architect with Halverson Ty and Bond.
And I am Jackson Lynch. I'm an engineering associate with Kittleson and Associates, and we've been helping Halverson, Time Bond, and Myra with the transportation aspects of this project.
Why was this project initiated? The landowner, the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, also known as DCR, approached us to help kick off this project. This section of Mystic Valley Parkway and also the section south was included in their DCR Parkways master plan. And they wanted us to advance from the planning idea into more of a conceptual design and to begin some of the field work associated with that. This section of the Parkway 2 along the Mystic Lakes is part of our Mystic Greenways vision at the Mystic River Watershed Association. It's, of course, it's a really valued destination for everyone. We'll look at that in a moment. Project funding, we received a generous grant from the state's Mass Trails program, which is an interagency program between DCR, Massachusetts Department of Transportation, and the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. We received match funding from the Lawrence and Lillian Solomon Foundation's Greener and Greater program. The scope of work includes advancing the development of a 2-mile accessible path along the Mystic Lakes, enhancing its quality, use, and ecological value. The goals of the project are to improve safety and accessibility, enhance recreational experience, improve the ecological health of the Mystic Lakes, and promote active transportation within the Mystic River Reservation Path Network. We have turned to these goals in the scope of work quite regularly in order to help provide a guiding hand in the design process. Included in this work is land survey, a cultural resources assessment, an ecological resources assessment, community engagement, a traffic count analysis, conceptual design for the path and also the alignment of Mystic Valley Parkway, pedestrian crossings, stormwater management, as there's currently a lot of runoff off of the Parkway and into the lakes, site amenities, and we're also exploring best options for surface type. What is not included, we are funded through conceptual design. After our scope of work is complete here, we're going to be producing a report for the Department of Conservation and Recreation to consider the project for funding. So what is not included in our work is construction level design, permitting and construction of the project, the site area beyond the path, and parking management and operations. We know that Shannon Beach can get very busy in the summer, so we are looking at some design elements related to parking as it relates to the alignment of the path and the parkway, but we are not addressing necessarily the operations, the day-to-day operations for DCR. One other note I'll say in terms of the site area, and moving on here, is that the rotaries at High Street in Medford, and then across the river at Arlington Street, are being included as part of a Massachusetts Department of Transportation, DCR, and Town of Arlington project. So both of the rotaries are going to be redesigned for safety, including pedestrian crossings and new facilities for safe bicycling, rolling, etc., as part of a completely different and quite large project. So we should look forward to seeing that project completed within the next 5 years, and the design for that work is going to be starting this year. To provide some additional site context for the project, everything you see here in the dashed white line was included. So that goes from the rotaries at High Street in Medford, northbound, across the border into Winchester, continuing past Shannon Beach, and ending at Bacon Street in Winchester, where the Wedgemere MBTA station is located, and also the Tri-Community Greenway begins. A few other destinations for this area, though, certainly the Mystic Lakes Dam and the Boat Club. And there's also another path project that's being designed as part of the Rotaries project on the very south edge of the lower Mystic Lake that the project will tie into. Next, we were going to look at work to date, and I'm going to turn things over to Bob to share a little bit of that.
Thank you, Carl. Just to highlight for you all, again, really the tremendous significance of this site through time. As you know, beginning way back, as Carl mentioned, highlighting the presence of indigenous peoples on these lands, overlooking the Mystic Lakes, and then moving into the early 1800s, the presence of the Middlesex Canal and its connection between Lowell and the city. And then in 1865, the creation of the Mystic Dam, which still exists today. And then both the involvement of Charles Elliott in the vision and the land acquisition for the Mystic Valley Parkway, and then the involvement of the Olmsted brothers in the designing of the Parkway. So quite a rich history of things to consider and to tap into as we think about this new vision. Next. And as Carl mentioned, now I've pardon the flip-flop, as I'll call it, we've kind of turned the site plan on its side so that Medford and High Street are on the left-hand side of the Rotaries there, and on the right-hand, the extreme right-hand side is Bacon Street, just to orient you. And again, as Carl pointed out, you know, there's a variety of different destinations. You know, there's more of a residential area with open space between that residential area and the lower Mystic Lakes. And then as we proceed northbound, you get to where the Mystic Lakes dams are, the Boat Club, and other overlooks in that location. And then as you move further northward, you encounter Shannon Beach, which is a terrific destination, and then Bacon Street further to the north beyond. And then we wanted to highlight for you all and for us, to kind of get us on common ground. Some of these things we already know and familiar with, but just to remind us that the south portion of the path closest to Medford really consists predominantly of kind of granular surface, dirt pathway, and there's limited areas of curbing there. Most of it is asphalt paving that simply transitions to off surface there. There's a lack of curb in most of the locations. There's street parking in the area, the residential area at the extreme south, closest to High Street. And then where there is utility, where there is street lighting on the south end, it's not on decorative poles, but it's on more wooden utility poles at the south end. As I mentioned, there's a lack of curbing, and as a result, stormwater sheet flow that falls on the roadway simply sheets off of the roadway towards the Mystic Lakes, often resulting in erosion and stormwater pollutants, you know, directly flow off of the roadway towards the lake unimpeded. In addition, one of the unique parts of the south end is there's residential abutters. There's really not as many residential abutters until you get past the Aubergine River on the north end. So residential abutters inland on the south end. Now, as we go back, as we go to the north end, the north character, it's highlighted by a bit different things. At the north end, the path in many places is paved with asphalt at the north end. In most of the area, there's already been improvements at the end closest to Winchester that include curbs on both sides of the parkway to define the edge of the roadway and also to capture stormwater. In the north end, there's multiple parking lots, whereas the south end, there are no parking lots, only street parking. On the north end, there are DCR standard, what we call pendant parkway street lights that are present there. And we want to think about emulating those across the whole parkway. And then, as I mentioned, stormwater drainage system exists within the roadway that captures all the stormwater that runs off and treats it before it ends up in the Mystic Lakes. And then one of the other highlights is that the MBTA right-of-way becomes more prevalent on the north end of the site up until the point we transition to the across the north of the Aberjona, where it becomes a bit more residential, and the Wedgemere T-stop is up in that location. Next, please. I just want to highlight for you and review kind of the design process we went through. As Carl mentioned, we established, started at the beginning of the project and established project goals as a way of kind of measuring, making sure that we, set principles of which we were evaluating ourselves against as we proceeded through the project. We also then did some data collection, as Carl mentioned, site reconnaissance, surveys, other things to get more informed about the site. And then we developed several different conceptual design alternatives, which we kind of put back through the community feedback. And then based upon that, we further refined them, and then we evaluated again against these 5 factors. Number 1 is, how can we think about how these alternatives can create enhanced environmental benefits, given the proximity to a great natural environment and the Mystic Lakes? How can we think about, within this Parkway area, how can we maximize safety, mobility, and accessibility within the enhancements that we're talking about? And as this place is already a great recreational experience, how can we think about enhancing the recreational experience, providing different means of egress and access to the water, and make sure that it's accessible and create viewpoints and so forth. In addition, we need to be mindful of permitting, in terms of the designs that we come up with. We need to be mindful of, are they going to be able to put through both environmental and cultural resources permitting? And then we need to be mindful of construction costs. So all those things continue to kind of go through our filter while we solicit community feedback, and then we head to a preferred conceptual design alternative. Next, please.
So how that has looked from a chronological standpoint, we kicked the project off in December of 2023, and we understand the importance of this area, of this stretch of the Parkway, of the lakes, and we wanted to make sure that we not only had the chance to share the project with you this evening, and the other public meetings. However, we put the word out, and out of 45 applicants, selected 10 residents to join a steering committee who have been meeting in parallel to these public meetings to help provide a guiding hand and resident voice in the project. So they've also assisted with engagement that we've been doing related to the project at recent events, such as we were at Shannon Beach on June 1st, we were at the Medford Farmers Market on the 6th, and then Winchester Farmers Market on the 8th, and it was great to have members of the resident steering committee there, and also helping to promote the project to their circles of community in Medford and Winchester. The project was very front-loaded with field work and assessments, the land surveying, environmental analysis, traffic studies, and initial visioning and listening sessions with members of the public. That informed our development of initial concepts that we presented in early April, and worked through to then develop our refined concept in late May, and presenting now here this evening. Yeah, and now I guess moving forward, yes, we are after tonight's meeting, we'll have a brief comment window for final edits to the design before submitting a final report to DCR for consideration of including the project in their capital plan. Next, I wanted to dive a bit deeper on a summary of community engagement that we've heard so far in the project. Over the course of February and March, when we conducted our listening sessions that informed the initial conceptual designs, we conducted a number of different online and in-person engagement strategies. We heard from 168 residents who provided over 1,200 different comments We asked folks to provide their thoughts, though, on what they currently like about this stretch of Mystic Valley Parkway and the lakes, what they currently do not like, what they would like to see, what they think that we should avoid for the designs. And we heard, over 1,200 different comments. We spent 2 weeks categorizing them into 30 different topics, ranging 3 categories: mobility, recreation, and environment. And I've listed just 3 abbreviated versions, but 8 key themes to follow. If we were to bucket those 8 key themes into 3 themes, safety and accessibility, interaction with nature, and ecological and habitat restoration. And really glad to see that those themes were in alignment with a couple of the project goals that we shared. Next, before I share a reminder of folks what the initial conceptual designs were, I wanted to share our process for hearing feedback on them. In the months of April and May, we asked members of the public during our public meeting, our resident steering committee meeting, online surveying, and we had several pop-up and in-person engagements. One with Winchester High School's cross-country team, which was very informative as everyday users. And we asked folks to please rank their overall preference for the design alternatives, from the most preferred to the least preferred, and then provide additional comments. Really, I think what the key thing to drive home here, and we spoke with about 250 residents, or heard from 250 residents, is that it's not that we're looking to choose exactly one preferred design over another. It was more to inform our decision making, and then also allow people to think through rationale and then provide additional comments on why they might prefer a certain design or another. To provide a bit of a refresher on what the concepts look like for the area south of Shannon, for the area and stretch south of Shannon Beach. Generally, the 3 alternatives included alternative number 1, which was a multi-use path with buffered bike lanes that would preserve the width of the existing right-of-way. Alternative number 2 narrowed the roadway, providing space for a multi-use path with a secondary path. And the third alternative also reduced the roadway, but instead introduced a significant plant buffer while retaining a multi-use path. And what we heard from the public in terms of preference was a general appreciation for alternative number 3. However, many individuals preferred alternative 1 and alternative 2. Generally, alternative 2 and alternative 3 had the least ranking for the least preferred, and I think that that showed appreciation for the roadway narrowing. But in terms of overall themes and what we heard from folks for the survey, common themes that we heard was that people who liked alternatives number 1 and number 2 appreciated having separate facilities for people biking and traveling fast, not in a vehicle, and then people walking, strolling, dog walking, rolling, you name it, but at a slower speed, and separating those. For alternatives number 2 and 3, the most common theme that we heard was to have separate facilities for biking from people using motor vehicles, and fears for greater concern around safety for that. We also heard a lot of folks who liked alternative number 3 because of the additional space it would provide with the plant buffer. North of Shannon Beach, we presented 2 alternatives. The first alternative provided buffered bike lanes on the roadway and preserved the existing sidewalk. So not much change, but new striping to provide for buffered bike lanes. Alternative number 2 introduced the multi-use path on the eastern side of the roadway while reducing the vehicle travel right-of-way. And for preference on that, Alternative number 2 was preferred only by, you know, a fair little bit, around 62% to 40%, and this was more of a one choice or the other. And in terms of survey comment themes, again, there was a breakout between generally folks who preferred to have separate facilities for people walking and biking for alternative number 1, and then a preference on alternative number 2 for people who preferred to have separate facilities for people bicycling and using motor vehicles. Throughout, there was some general comments regarding making sure that no matter what, there would be a safe and legible transition of the path between the characteristics south of Shannon Beach to the characteristics north of Shannon Beach. Around Shannon Beach, there's a lot of vehicles turning in and out. There's a lot of people walking with young kids. And so the important key for this was to make sure that there was limited conflicts between people using different modes of transportation. And we certainly heard that loud and clear. So with that, I just wanted to pause very briefly for a couple minutes and wanted to allow for any questions that have, or comments that have come in, clarifying questions or comments that have come in through the chat. So Isaiah, are there any clarifying questions that have come in that folks have had?
Nothing has come in yet, but if folks have clarifying questions that can help everybody better understand these slides, please feel free to direct them to me in the chat at this time. Okay, great. And okay, and maybe we'll be pausing after the traffic study. So if anybody wants to provide any clarifying questions or comments on the slides I've just shared, feel free to put them in and we'll address them at the next pit stop, if you will. All right, Jackson, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Carl. So as was mentioned in kind of the introduction to the study, we've collected some data along the Parkway at key junctions throughout the project to inform the decisions kind of through the early stages and then into some of the more refined stages of design. Early on in January, February of this year, we collected data for the in-roadway users along Mystic Valley. We collected speeds and volumes of vehicles on the roadway at one location further south beach in Medford, and then one location up by Wedgemere to kind of get the two character zones of the roadway. Well, the volumes on the roadway weren't extremely high as you might be able to fit through the roadway. This 5,500 vehicles in a day, it's about 1/2 to 1/4 of what we would see side of the lakes on Route 3. The speeds that we were seeing in both locations and kind of consistently along the Parkway were in pretty great excess of the speed limit of 25 miles an hour. So average speeds we were seeing between 30 and 40 miles an hour, and then some of the 85th percentile and max speeds that we were seeing were exceeding 60 miles an hour. So this led to our initial concepts and kind of viable solutions for bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So in the next slide, this is kind of our boiled down list of what, given the speeds that we're seeing out on the roadway, what could be considered a safe bicycle facility. So kind of requiring a greater level of separation than just a regular painted bike lane, given the speeds of 30, 35, 40 miles an hour. The two facilities that would be able to provide that sort of protection. One is a fully separated, grade separated bicycle lane, and then the other would be a two-way bike lane or a shared use path. And then similarly, given the high speeds that we were seeing along the roadway, in order to create safe pedestrian crossings, we recommend at least providing high visibility crosswalks, and then also looking to pedestrian refuge islands to kind of narrow vehicles down as they're approaching the crosswalk, and to allow for pedestrians to cross one lane at a time. And then in certain situations, a raised crosswalk or speed humps could be considered, but they would need to be kind of paired with other traffic calming measures in order to be effective. Since this data collection early on that informed our initial alternatives. We went back out and collected volumes of people walking and biking, both on the path and in the roadway. So we went out kind of in the middle of May. We got lucky. We got a really nice day where there were a lot of people out enjoying the path, and we collected the volumes for users at a point south of Shannon Beach, and then also at a point north up by Wedgemere. As you might expect, given kind of the conditions of the pathway today, most of the bicyclists that we saw were using the road, with a small minority using the path. And at the higher of the two locations, so that was south by Shannon Beach, we found a little over 1,000 people out total using the pathway, between people walking and then people biking on the path and people biking on the road. Just to put that number in a bit of perspective, we took a look at some of the volumes of trails around the region that you might be more familiar with and could kind of vision what these volumes look like. So the Minuteman is one that many people are familiar with. There is a counter along the Minuteman just south of Kickstand Cafe in Arlington Center. And that, looking at some of the historical data we found, was getting between 1,500 and 4,000 users total in a day. So, we're seeing 3 to 4 times what we observed along the Mystic Lakes when we were collecting our data. And then another trail in Malden that we have kind of a similar counter that collects this data on an automated basis is the Northern Strand. And there we're seeing closer to what we observed in the Mystic Lakes, which is between 500 and 1,800 users in a day. And just as a point of reference, the Northern Strand for that Tuesday, the May 14th, we saw 1,500 total users. So kind of towards the higher end of the range that we would expect to see throughout the year, which, it is a kind of a good validation for the fact or data point that we're working with to project some of our volumes, is kind of a strong showing of what we might expect to see on a higher volume day. One other way of putting this into perspective is using a metric that's called trail level of service. And that essentially looks at the width of the trail, and it looks at the volume and distribution of users kind of between people biking and people walking. And then it attempts to rank how much space you have available, kind of given the space that you have and the amount of people that are trying to use that space. And it ranks it from ample space, which a rare condition of essentially an over-designed path where you have a 16-foot wide path with little to no users on it in a given hour. And then kind of the green good conditions can absorb more users is really where you want to design a path to, where the path is right-sized to the amount of users that are using it, and is able to take on more users as demand grows and as more people want to use the path as it becomes more desirable. And then kind of as it gets below, you could go down to fair conditions, nearing or at capacity. And then outside of what this table shows is over capacity. So the Northern Strand today is kind of between the good and the fair conditions, and the Minuteman is between the fair and the nearing or at capacity, which some folks might feel is, as representative of their experience. I know we hear a lot about crowding on the Minuteman. And kind of where we looked with the volumes that we saw in the Mystic Lakes today, we found that a 12-foot path would kind of put us right in the sweet spot of providing enough space for the people today, and also providing enough space to absorb more users. And it's worth noting that kind of the volumes that we assume to put us in that range assumes that every user who is out along the roadway and the pathway today would be moving over to the pathway, which we consider to be a conservative estimate. We assume that in reality, there will still be bicyclists who continue to use the roadway as it will remain a parallel viable option. And then that helped guide our decision into some of the geometry and the width of the path moving forward.
Thank you, Jackson. Isaiah, I wanted to give an opportunity again to pause for any clarifying questions or comments coming in from the chat. How are things looking?
Yes, so I do have a few questions this time. The first one is, I guess there's a question about whether we have done any studies regarding not just traffic, but also whether there are any crashes or accidents along the path, and whether that's been studied.
Jackson?
We have not looked into crash data along the path. And typically that's something that we would expect more to see at intersections, but it's a good point.
Another question is whether a design like alternative number 2, which is reducing the road width, would reduce the shoulder such that bikers would be directed onto the path as opposed to in the roadway. So if there's, I guess the question is, if there's a road diet, would it be less safe for bikers to be in the road?
I think that the prediction is that narrowing the roadway, providing some shoulders would, I think it would encourage some users to move over to the pathway, as we would like to, provide a safe experience for these people who want to have an experience bicycling along the pathway outside of the roadway. But we will still be providing a shoulder, as is kind of in accordance with DCR's design standards for people who would like to continue biking in the roadway. I think the expectation would be people traveling at speeds of 20 plus miles an hour will still feel comfortable riding in the roadway. Kind of as in a similar vein, narrowing the roadway will be reducing vehicle speed, so we'll hopefully be providing a more comfortable experience for people who choose to roadway, but certainly providing a path for people who are looking to get off the roadway is part of the goal of an alternative 2 or 3 in providing that shared use path.
And then another kind of the inverse of that is, do we expect that perhaps increasing the width of the path would impact sort of bike speed on the path and also the amount of bikes? And are there any expectations for how much bike usage might increase with these sorts of improvements?
I think that there is, a fair assumption that some of the volumes of bicyclists might increase in the area as people have a more comfortable facility to go to. There is not great data that would tell us kind of like how much that would happen by, and kind of the degree to which that would increase. Additionally, it's not there is not strong data that says that a wider path width encourages faster bicycling, but it does tell us that a wider path would provide more room for passing and more comfortable passing, where people would be able to walk, bicycle alongside each other, and do so kind of giving each other more space and more room to meander around each other on the path.
And then I have one final comment before we sort of have to, I think, move on into the next sections of the presentation, but just what's the current width of the path looking like? So how much of a change would a 12-foot path, for example, be from the current width?
I believe that the current path varies from, in some areas, a 2-3 foot wide dirt path to a 4 to 5 foot wide, essentially a sidewalk along the roadway. So it would be a pretty substantial increase in both width and also kind of the quality and character of the path.
Alrighty, I think I'm getting a few more questions coming in, but I understand that we want to move on to other parts of the presentation. So I'll just make sure that I'm recording everyone's questions and comments as they come in, and hopefully there'll be another time to address them as we continue. But please feel free to continue sending them. I'm recording every question that comes in the chat, and if we're not able to get to it during the presentation, we'll be sure to follow up and answer them afterwards.
Thank you, Isaiah. All right. Iris, I believe this is you.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. So based on the public feedback and the traffic and Parkway study with the goal of improving safety and accessibility, as well as enhancing recreational experience and environmental benefit, we are proposing the following improvements that are consistent through the 2-mile Parkway, with a few variations that we will explain in details later. So when you look at the section here, we are proposing the road diet, that the roadway existing width is 36 feet, and we are proposing to reduce to 27 feet with 10.5 feet of drive lane each way with 3 feet of shoulder. And with the additional space gaining from the roadway, we are able to provide wider plant buffer for stormwater treatment, and as well as 12-foot multi-use space. And where space allowed, we are proposing a secondary pace as well. And along the whole stretch of the corridor, we are proposing the granite curb along both roadway edge, and also using DCR's historical pendant lighting that continues from Winchester to Mayfair. And in certain area, we are proposing sitting element and overlook as well. So next slide. Yeah, and here is a graph to show that from the perspective that the new roadway edge will be like in between that the white and yellow line on the existing photo on the upper right, and for a new pace will probably we are showing is the existing pace probably to the roadway edge. So in between the space will be a new planting buffer that we can install more street trees, and also the native planting for stormwater management. Next. And here is the map to showing our proposed other improvements, such as the traffic calming and pedestrian crossing at each intersection. And we are also proposing expand the parking, street parking along the southern portion of the residential area, as well as reconfigure the existing parking at the northern portion, and also proposing a parking lot across the Shannon Beach that we will talk in detail later. And also that you can see that we have these picnic table icons, and also like some kayak icon and outlook that we are proposing through the whole the Parkway, that to provide space for people to sit and enjoy the scenery. And next. And Jason can talk about the traffic calming measure at intersection in more detail here.
Yep. Yeah, so as we mentioned before, kind of with the high vehicle speeds that we saw, we wanted to be really intentional about how we treated the mid-block crossings for people crossing the road, to make sure that we could do it in a safe manner. So kind of the typical solution that we came up, and we'll see it spaced out along the Parkway as we get into the into the more detailed lens is this mid-block crossing that kind of widens out from the median of the roadway, the vehicle lanes as they approach the crosswalk on either side to help, both provide a little bit of horizontal deflection to slow cars down and then also narrow the lanes to slow vehicles down. And then, the pedestrian refuge in the middle allows pedestrians to essentially wait at the roadway edge, wait till they find a gap in traffic in one direction, cross the street, wait in what would be a 7-foot minimum refuge space that provides enough space for somebody with a visual impairment to kind of detect and know that they're waiting in the refuge area. And also enough space if somebody were to cross the roadway with a bicycle to kind of stand without being in the roadway. And then they can wait in the refuge area, be visible to cars, wait for either a vehicle to yield or for a gap in traffic, and then continue crossing on the road. And then kind of in addition, at the side streets where there is not a sidewalk network to tie into, we would be constructing a pedestrian ramp to receive the crossing, and then it would kind of tie around the corner and bring pedestrians onto the shoulder of the side street.
Thank you, Jackson. While we'll be looking at each character zone's refined design concept in a moment and really drilling down, Isaiah, I wanted to pause after this overview summary just to quickly check in on clarifying questions and comments.
Yeah, so there's a few. The first one is whether we have looked into how narrowing the roadway might impact congestion along the pathway, or sorry, along the roadway rather.
Yeah, I can speak to that briefly. So narrowing the kind of the lanes and the shoulders should not impact congestion along the roadway. We're still providing in each direction that has the same capacity as the existing roadway.
And I think this may have been in one of the slides, but what is how wide are the vehicle lanes now versus the proposed width?
I believe today they range from maybe 12 to 15 feet, kind of the area of the roadway, and proposed they're 10.5, which is kind of in line with what we would want for a roadway such as this that doesn't allow buses or heavy vehicles, and is kind of designed exclusively for cars and smaller vehicles.
We have a question about the removal of existing trees along the path.
We'll be touching on that a bit later.
And then does the typical crossing design mean that shoulders would be eliminated there? And what might that mean for a cyclist who's traveling in the shoulders?
So they wouldn't be eliminated. They would be narrowed down to about 2 feet. So I think, if there was a cyclist traveling in the 3-foot shoulder, they would likely have space through the duration of that crossing as the roadway narrows. But some of these details will be worked out in the final design.
Why would the secondary path need to be 6 feet wide? Could it be smaller because other folks might be using the wider 12-foot path? Or I guess maybe the root of that question is how is 6 feet decided as the width of the secondary path compared to any other potential width?
Yeah, 6 feet is like not set in stone, but like we just feel like 6 feet is more comfortable for like two-way working with like probably 3 or 4 people that can work side by side. yeah, so allow people space for people pacing. Yeah. But it could be 5 feet.
I think, yeah, 6 feet also allows for maybe 2 people in mobility devices to pass by each other. So
Got it.
provides a more accessible facility.
And then a last question about how are we thinking about preventing tree roots from impacting the experience along the path?
Yeah.
I can, or Iris.
Usually the tree root problem is that because they don't have enough soil volume for them to develop. And in this improvement, we are providing more like a significant increase of the soil volume around the trees. So you will greatly reduce that tree root problem, intruding or penetrate to the pavement.
And then actually one last question, which is how might this design impact the existing secondary trails that sort of pop off into the woods at some of the peninsulas?
I think we'll be touching on that as we go through each of the character zones. So maybe perhaps we could get going. And one additional note on the tree root problem, which certainly is it depends on the tree species. Some tree species have a lot more shallower root systems, and others have much deeper, and so that goes into the planting programs for a given project. Alrighty, Iris.
So it's a beautiful evening today. So let's take a walk with a fresh eye with that our idea of the improvement along the parkway. So the first portion of the trail is from the south is we call it character zone 1. It's that adjacent to north of the high street and adjacent to the residential neighborhood with the street parking along the eastern side. And for this portion that we are proposing to extend the existing parking street parking along the eastern side to the Ravine Road and keeping the existing curb line on both sides that make sure that we have sufficient driving width and the shoulder. And next. So for the proposed 12-feet path here, we would like to preserve as many existing trees as possible. So the concept for the new 12-foot wide multi-use path will be in between the existing trees. And yes, and then the left side will become planting buffer. And also we have the idea to improve the existing narrower path along the shoreline to the 6 feet and secondary path. Next. And then while we approaching the Ravine Road intersection here, that we identify a location that's at the left side of the guardrail that it would be suitable for a kayak launch area. And in the, yes, there. And also like we are proposing to provide like 5 parallel parking space along this stretch. They can serve the people using kayak ramp. Okay, yes, and then next. So this is the plan to show that improvement and also that all each crossing, new crossing at each intersection, and also like extend the curb extension to provide that refuge and make crossing safer. And also like propose like additional trail to connect the new 12-foot multi-use trail with to the secondary trail. And also we are thinking that there could be a opportunity for natural play area at that the intersection that we show in that brown area there. Yes, thank you, Carl. Yeah, and And also like, you can see the icon showing the kayak ramp and overlook opportunity. Okay, and next. And here is to show that the section of the new improvement with the is keeping existing roadway width, but provide wider planting buffer and multi-use space and a secondary path. And we also have more opportunity to provide plant new trees. Next. And in this further north, like we call it character zone 2, is between Ravine Road and the Pine Ridge Road. And the character here is the existing pace is lower than the roadway and have wider planting buffer already. That is kind of it provides a very nice experience for people walk along, that they feel they are much separate from the roadway. And on this photo, that the new roadway will be narrowed down to the right side of the white line. So we are extending the planting area significantly. And you can see that there's a tape measurement below, and part of it is covered by the grass, but like we are showing the 12 feet wide pace. So the pace will be the western edge of the pace will be remained and then expand to the eastern side. Next. Yeah, so here you can clearly see that 12 feet wide pace. What's the difference between the existing and the proposed? And next. So here that we are showing that there's more opportunity for seating elements and also improvement of the at the intersection. And next. So here you can see that the roadway is narrowed down, and we are able to have a bioswale along the multi-use pace and further enhance the separation between the roadway and the pace. Yeah, next. Okay, and then moving north between the Pine Ridge Road and the Pine Ridge Terrace, the existing pace is along the roadway, and like there's no clear buffer, and users usually feel that they are very close to the traffic. So the new roadway edge will be at the right of the white line, and the new pace is probably as wide as the to the light pole there. Next. And then further north, there's a larger opening area, and the idea is as well to keep the existing tree, but expand the planting buffer to the right. And then this could be a nice picnic area for people to stop and enjoy the lake. Next. So along this buffer, we are able to propose a lot of new trees along the roadway edge, and also like provide like seating element, and also the improvement of the intersection. Okay, next. Yeah, and here is the same. They're showing the planting buffer, and at some section, the buffer will be narrower. Yeah. Next. So for the character zone 4, it's getting interesting because that the existing pace at the left is much lower than roadway, but in the beginning of these trails, you can see that there's a very steep slope and a lot of erosion occurred. So the idea is to continue the proposed trail along the roadway from the character zone 3. And then while like and restore the slope between the new path and the existing path, that restore the slope and stabilize it. And then further north, we are going to provide a secondary path connecting to the existing path that we can see on the diagram later. Next. Okay, yes. So here, like the secondary path will be much separate from the roadway, and the new proposed 12-feet path will be on top as well. And we are providing connection between existing trees. Next. So here at the left side, you will see the dashed line that shows the existing path, but we are proposing the continue of the 12 pace from the character zone 3 and keep it on top of along the roadway, but have the opportunity that at the intersection of the Pine Ridge Road to provide a connection. So once people like cross the roadway, they can choose they want to stay on top or going to the secondary path that's much closer to the lake. And here that they will have some existing tree need to be removed because the narrow condition on top. But we are able to like provide new tree planting as well. And then also like this portion is a good opportunity to provide like overlook and also like additional seating element along the secondary path. And to the intersection of the Mystic Lake Dam, like we are proposing a tabletop crossing that allow pedestrians cross the intersection safely, and also like have a stop sign, narrow down the curb cut, and have a stop sign at the intersection that allow cars from the dam road stop before they turn. And also like we are proposing a new parking lot along that branch with 12 new spaces. Next.
Actually, I think before we head into the next session, I wanted to pause briefly to turn back to any clarifying questions or comments. Isaiah?
Carl, we still have one page.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Oh, there's the plus sign. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I think in this section, you can clearly see the secondary path is much closer to the lake and have a greater elevation separation from the roadway. And for users who enjoy the faster speed or like the wider pace, they can stay along the roadway as well. Yeah. Okay.
Isaiah?
All right. So a question is, will there be parking on the east side of the Mystic Valley Parkway up to Ravine Road, or will it be across the street on the west side of the road? I think this is back in character zone 1.
I think if we stop at this section, you can see that the right of way along the eastern side is very close to the existing roadway edge. So, and also based on the character, like we are concerned about if we provide parking on the eastern edge after the Ravine Road, that we will also need to provide a sidewalk and more crossing. So that they might create some like problem, and also like we are limited with the space there.
So to clarify, the parking is preserved and I think extended a little bit
Extended, yeah.
from High Street north to Ravine Road.
On
east
the
side.
east side of the Mystic Valley Parkway.
Yeah.
Another question is regarding the kayak launch that's near Ravine Road. Is it going to be possible to cross the street with a kayak? Considering sort of the configuration of the crossing. I know we'd taken into account the width of a bike, but maybe the width of a kayak.
Yeah, I don't think that the crossing islands will be quite wide enough for a standard kayak. But I think, there would be room to hold it horizontally in the crossing island if you're looking for a place to wait, or, ideally you're more visible crossing the street and cars are going slower. It should at least be a better experience than it is today crossing the street with a kayak. Even if it's hard to fit yourself into the refuge island.
And then another question about the new proposed parking lot at the dam and how that sort of intersects with both cycling and pedestrian traffic. So how would people leaving the new dam parking lot intersect with cyclists? And is it going to be parallel parking or something else?
So the parking lot would be kind of past the path. So somebody traveling to and from the parking lot would cross over the path on what we're proposing to be a raised crossing. So the path would cross the dam parking lot. At grade, cars would have to slow down to kind of come up to the path, go down, and they would continue on the pull into the parking lot. So that would kind of be action crossing the path, parking, and then when you're leaving, you'd be pulling out, and then we're providing enough space for a car to cross the path and then have enough space to wait for a gap in traffic without blocking the path.
And then I'm getting some more questions about sort of surface type, which I know we may be talking about a little bit later in the presentation. Is that right, Carl?
Yes, we will in the site amenities section, correct.
Fantastic. And I'll just reiterate for chats that are coming through that are more comments than clarifying questions. I'm sort of interpreting clarifying questions as ones that help everybody understand the material that's being presented. Just rest assured that I'm recording those comments and we will take them into account as we continue to move forward with this design process.
Jess, I received another question regarding parking at the kayak put in character zone 1, I believe. Did you want to touch on the parking at that location a little bit in greater detail? Where is it? Here it is. Or I can touch on it as well. So if you do note, we are looking, so for the kayak launch and put in, ideally you won't need to cross the street with your kayak. We are proposing 5 parallel parking spaces specifically for the kayak purposes of boat launching. That is approximately near the area where there is the rail guard. Fast forward here. Yes, okay. All right, Jess.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we are entering character zones 5 and 6. And this section is basically stretching between the dam and Shannon Beach parking lot. So along this portion of the site, so before the path was kind of lower than the roadway, now the path is back up and level with the roadway. And along this section, we come across 4 parking lots that vary in size and occur intermittently. So in this first photo, this is the third parking lot from the dam looking north. And as you can see, the path condition, it's pretty tight and tucked between a hillside to our west or the left side and parking to the east. And then on the next slide, or the next photo. So this is the 4th parking lot looking north, or the one closest to the Shannon Beach parking lot. And here conditions get even tighter, with the path maybe being 4 to 5 feet wide and the slope going steeply down towards the water to our left and the parking immediately to our right. So if we look at the concept plan, basically, we've taken a closer look at how we can reconfigure these lots to help optimize the new path experience. So those areas that are circled in pink are those existing parking lot locations that we generally try to keep in order to minimize site disturbance. Parking lots 1 and 2, as you'll see in the following slide, we decided it would make most sense to merge those into one, since the parking lot number 2 seemed too small to kind of stand alone. And another thing that we tried to do in this section to give the parking lots more purpose is cluster various types of amenities, including seating areas, overlook areas, as well as another kayak and canoe launch, specifically at parking lot number 3. So on the next slide are plan enlargements of these parking reconfigurations. So from both an environmental and cultural resources perspective, we tried to limit any type of site disturbance between the west edge of the existing path and the east edge of the existing roadway, as Iris was describing earlier. So even though we're narrowing and necking down most of the roadway along the project site, we still want to try to be able to fit in a comfortable 12-foot wide path, as well as gain a plant buffer wherever possible. So what we ended up proposing for each lot was first adding a 6-foot wide tree buffer to help separate the parking circulation from roadway traffic, and then making the parking spaces, which I believe most are currently perpendicular, but making them angled or parallel to also help minimize the amount of pavement that we would need to include here. And then in between the angled parking and the new plant buffer, we're proposing a one-way drive aisle in order to make the circulation very clear and safer for users. So in the first enlargement at the top, again, we merged lots 1 and 2 with angled spaces. And in the second enlargement below, you can see in lot 3, we had to do something a little bit different given the tighter space that we had to work with. Instead of angled, we've had to tighten it here even further with parallel spaces. But we also felt that this would better serve users coming in with long kayaks and canoes, which we actually observed occurring at this location during one of our site walks. And then finally, lot 4, which is that smaller lot over there, we were able to fit angled parking in that area. But again, adding in the 6-foot wide tree buffer and the one-way drive aisle. And then on the next slide is a section study that cuts through lot 4, so that smaller lot that's closest to the Shannon Beach parking lot, just to give you a better sense of the before and after conditions for the path and parking experience. So as you can see on the top, the path experience is pretty tight between the hillside and then the parking to our right. And the pavement it very much feels like kind of like a sea of pavement that's continuous from the parking through the roadway. And then at the bottom is the proposed section that kind of helps to illustrate how we're kind of breaking down the space and into more usable spaces and kind of working our from the outside edges and in. So from the west side, from the western edge of the existing path, we've extended that to a 12-foot wide multi-use path. And then from the eastern side, or the east edge of the existing parkway, we've narrowed down the roadway as shown. And then in between, we were able to fit the angled parking with the one-way drive aisle, as well as a planted island that can also serve as the tree buffer that we've shown mostly along the multi-use path earlier. So I can pause here for questions or keep going.
Sure. Isaiah, maybe one or two questions have come in.
Yes. So there's a couple. We have a question about going back to the parking at the dam. How does the number of parking spaces opened up compare to the amount of parking in the existing lot?
So I think in general, in this section that we're calling character zone 5 and 6, because we had to reorient the parking to be angled, we did lose some parking overall, but we have gained back in the south section with the additional parallel parking spaces, the new parking at the dam, and then as you'll see later on, we have looked at expanding the parking lot at Shannon Beach, where we felt that parking would be even more needed to be able to handle the higher users that are there.
Another question is, are we looking at any sort of like limitations on parking, whether that be payment or time limitations?
That follow into the realm of parking operations. Not at this time or at this stage of the design process.
So we have some questions about sort of the overall change to number of parking spaces. I think maybe we can save that to is there a summary that's coming down the line?
We do, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so we'll save that.
Let's carry on.
Okay.
Next slide.
All right, so now we're entering what we're calling character zone 7. So basically Shannon Beach parking lot, where we all know it gets super busy during the summertime. And as we discussed at the last meeting, this was a critical point where we're proposing to transition the path from the west side of the parkway to the east side in order to make a clear and safe connection to Wedgemere Station and the Tri-Community Greenway that's located further north. So as you can see in this photo, just to the right is a signalized crosswalk, and that's where we felt made the most sense to provide that safe transition to occur. Next slide, please. And then another thing that we looked at in this area is formalizing the overflow parking area that's located just across the street from the Shannon Beach parking lot in order to help increase parking capacity at Shannon Beach. And the next slide. So back to the concept plan, as you can see at the first red circle, this is where the path crosses over the parkway to the east side using the same crosswalk treatments that we applied earlier. And one thing that we want to point out is that this transition happens just south of what you see as the expanded Shannon Beach parking area, and then continues along the outside edge of the parking lot to keep path users outside of all the vehicular traffic that is occurring within the parking lots. And then meanwhile, we also looked at formalizing that footpath that occurs along that existing tree median between the existing lot and the parkway. And to help further elaborate on how the vehicular circulation works, Jackson, if you wanted to chime in.
Sure, yeah. So I think one thing that we wanted to be really mindful of in this area, kind of with the additional crossings and with the additional parking area and circulation about that, was just making all the movements as clear and kind of as tight and as sensible as they could be. So the way that we were able to do that was kind of working off of the existing circulation of the Shannon Beach parking lot, which kind of starts on the northern end and then travels south and then exits at the intersection right to the north of the existing crossing we continued that as essentially a one-way circulation into the other parking lot. So that way, if somebody is kind of looking for a spot at Shannon Beach, they're not able to find one in one of the parking lots, they're able to get to the other end of the parking lot, cross the street, and kind of continue that search. In addition to that circulation, kind of within the kind of the wide lanes that we have in the curb to curb today, we're able to fit left turn lanes, kind of both in the northbound and in the southbound direction to enter each of those parking lots. So that should help with some of the traffic operations and to kind of clarify what people's intentions are as they're entering in the parking lot. And then additionally, with the space that those left turn lanes created, we were able to propose wider pedestrian refuges at each of these 3 crossings. So those are closer to 11, 12 feet and should provide kind of a safer crossing through all of the operations of the parking lots.
Isaiah, have any other questions come in regarding the parking lot?
Yeah, there's a few more. So there's a question about, or maybe a clarification on a previous question about that little section at the dam, and I think I'll ask it this way, which is that where the new parking is proposed near the dam, there's already a little sort of pavement area, which seems like it maybe was parking at one time, but I know has been roped off at other times. So what is, I guess, what's the sort of condition of that area, and how does the proposal sort of change that condition?
So I believe the proposed parking area would be kind of a formal asphalt parking area with at least one accessible parking space. So it would essentially take what is out there today and formalize it. I don't think that there's like a really great way of quantifying what the existing parking is today because it's not, formalized in any sense. So it would essentially be taking that and creating a more structured set of parking around it.
Let's see. There's another question about the land on the east side of the Parkway. Is there any flexibility with using that land to either sort of widen the roadway or open up any additional space?
Iris, would you like to touch on that again?
Not quite understand the question. Is it like expand the parkway along the eastern side along this portion?
Yeah, like utilizing the land that's currently east of the curb line on the Parkway for widening of facilities, for example.
I would think that the new parking is much needed than a new lane, driving lane, because like I think that the through traffic data that we understand the traffic volume is not that big, but like there's a greater need for the parking here. And also like we would try to save the existing tree along the eastern curb line. That's our intent as well.
And for areas south of Shannon Beach, we actually looked at utilizing the area east of the curb line. There's actually significant cultural resources that actually would make it very difficult to permit the project east of the existing curb line for the Parkway, and that's a permitting consideration that we had to expanding it east where possible. Any others?
Yeah, a couple others. So sort of up at Shannon Beach, could we just maybe just get another summary of Is there a reduction to the number of spots in the existing lot, and then how many spots are then going to be added across the street? So what's the overall impact of what's being proposed?
Okay. So I think the overall we are gaining like 55 parking space, and we have reduced around 20 space between in the 4 parking lot between the dam and the Shannon Beach. But we are adding like 13 parking space, street parking space at the southern portion of the residential area, and adding another 5 for the new kayak ramp, and adding 12 for that at the Mystic Lake Dam. So like in general, we are increasing like 55 parking space.
And I think to speak to the existing Shannon Beach parking lot, we're not proposing to change that configuration at all. So this proposed layout just ties into that existing configuration and leaves that part of the lot the same as it is today.
And then one last question, which is looking at the plant buffer, would that obscure views for people driving on the Parkway of the lake, views of the lake specifically?
I don't think so, because the tree we are proposing will have the branches higher than 6 feet. So our viewport is not going to block our viewport, and the low planting, like planting shrub or perennial, we have in mind would be at a range of 2 to 3 feet high. So the idea is to still keep the viewport to view shed to the lake open.
It is a very pretty drive. Great. All right, so let's continue onward, or Iris or Jessica, feel free to take it away.
Yep. Okay, so now I think we're entering the last section, character zones 8 and 9, leaving Shannon Beach, crossing the Aberjona Bridge and heading towards Wedgemere Station, towards the north end of our site. So as you can see in this photo, we start to lose some wiggle room here as we go over the bridge and a little beyond as the land quickly slopes down on the east side to the Aberjona River. So the path here is going to need to narrow down a little to about 9 feet on the east side, as you'll see on the plan. And then on the next photo, as we approach the station, we do start to gain a little bit more room again to allow us to kind of peel away from the curb and widen back to a 12-foot wide path again. Next slide, please. So again, just to recap, if we start from the top left corner, you can see that 12-foot wide path leaving the Shannon Beach parking lot with a pretty generous amount of planted buffer space with lots of new trees. But as we approach the bridge, the space that we have to work with starts to get pretty tight. So we'll have to narrow it down to a 9-foot wide path, and it will require us to basically hug along the curb, along the bridge, and a little bit past that. But as we approach the station, as you can see from that photo before, we do start to gain more space to be able to widen the path again to a 12-foot wide path and have just enough space to have a little bit of a planting buffer to separate path users from the road. And then to make our final connection to the Wedgemere Station and the tri-community path beyond, our preferred option is to continue the path towards that the second intersection or crosswalk that kind of cuts through the middle of the lot, and then striping the lot as needed to create a clear passage through to the Wedgemere Station tunnel that connects back to the path. And then the dashed line just to the left of that enters through that first intersection is an alternative approach, but with whichever alternative that we go with, it will be coordinated with MBTA and the town of Winchester. And then finally, at Bacon Street, the end of our site, we've improved that intersection, narrowing it down, and implementing the same traffic calming and crossing improvement measures that we applied earlier. And I think there's a few more slides after this. And then these are just some section studies to kind of give you a sense of the much tighter space that we're working with here. Going back to the bridge, again, the multi-use path ends up narrowing down to a 9-foot wide path along this section. And then the next slide. As we approach character zone 9, where basically the condition to the west of us becomes much more residential in character with lots of more old growth, mature trees. It gives us even more reason to have the multi-use path on the east side. And again, we do gain a little bit more space to be able to widen the path back to a more generous 12-foot wide path and be able to fit a little plant buffer to fit in some new street trees. And I think that closes off the tour.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And Isaiah, I just wanted to turn briefly, were there any clarifying questions regarding the character zones, specifically 8 and 9, before we move on?
Good question. I think there were a couple of questions just generally wondering about the way that people if there's a flow of people coming along the path, they will be crossing at Shannon Beach and over to the other side of the road, and maybe questions around sort of making sure that that's safe and how much interruption we expect that to cause to the flow of car traffic as well.
Jackson?
Sure. Yeah, I think that kind of the key measures we're taking in terms of safety is adding the crossing island and kind of putting the main crosswalk that we expect the shared use path users to be crossing at kind of outside of the main influence area of the parking lot. So users should be able to cross one lane, similar to what we had talked about earlier with that diagram of the crossing island, wait in the refuge, and then cross the following lane. And with the addition of the turn lanes into the parking lots kind of in the northbound and southbound direction, it shouldn't create a huge kind of traffic operations problem. I think that on a really busy day, it's hard to completely mitigate traffic operations issues in an area like Shannon Beach, where there are a lot of people in a lot of different modes kind of coming into the same area. But what we're doing is just trying to create, a slow speed environment that is clear where people are supposed to go, so that everyone can kind of interact alongside each other in a safe manner.
And Isaiah, maybe time for one more question related to character zones 8 or 9.
Let's see. There's a couple of questions about are there warning lights or signals where people are crossing?
So yeah, as there would be some signs for advanced crossings. There could be the opportunity to add a flashing beacon, like a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. But we've generally found that those are less effective in areas where speeds are in excess of 30 miles an hour. So we've leaned more towards the physical separation of the crossing island, but it doesn't preclude the addition of a flashing beacon or a pedestrian hybrid beacon.
Thank you. And again, we'll have an opportunity for a brief Q&A discussion at the end of tonight if we haven't gotten to a question or comment yet. And then I'll also follow up written over the coming days. Alrighty, Iris?
So in summary, like I mentioned before, that we are proposing additional 55 parking space. Majority of them will be at the Shannon Beach, but we are increasing around 18 more spaces along the southern residential area. And then for all the new parking space we propose, there will be a accessible parking space as well. And also that compare that existing condition with the new proposed plan, you can see that there are much more sitting area along the existing pace with additional overlook and the boat ramp. And I think also that we will probably remove around like 30 trees. Majority, some of them will be in the character zone for that, where the trail is much lower than the existing roadway. But we are proposing more than like 200 trees along this 2-mile stretch. Next. So we are going to show you some of the site amenity precedent image. So this one is to show the potential paved surface. Like we are consider the S4 pace for the 12 feet wide multi-use pace, but it's still to be decided during the design development phase. And also like we are consider that organic rock stone dust paste for the secondary paste. Next. And here is some image of the overlook fishing pier or like the sitting deck that has no high rating guardrail, but it's only applied to the area that without significant elevation drop. Next. And here is showing multiple options for potential seating. It could be DCR standard sitting bench at the upper left image, or some granite block as an informal seating area, or like some lounge chair, and or like big wood block sitting. Next. And here is some idea of the interpretive side throughout the pace, and we could have the opportunity to provide the interpretive element that's more interactive and bring the interest of kids. Next. And then here is that idea for boat launch areas. Be stepping down or like a slope, a ramp condition with the larger granite block that fit with the overall context and the natural character of the site. And next. And we also have that idea that we could create more like sensory work for along the secondary pace. They have some element that can bring the interest for kids to closer to the nature and interactive with nature. Next.
Briefly, Isaiah, were there any questions specific to the site amenities that we can help to address?
Good question. There's a question about multilingual interpretive signage and how we're thinking about that, and if there's a way to provide additional comments on this.
Yeah, absolutely. As you can imagine, we haven't designed the signage yet, but multilingual is certainly something that was expressed as something that members of the public would be interested in seeing coming out of our listening sessions phase of the project. And you know, as we move forward and share, you know, our progress with DCR, I think that's a comment that we can certainly pass along. Thank you.
think that was the only additional question about, I mean, there's some, yeah, I think that was the only additional question that came in about the amenities so far.
Okay. Alrighty. Great. Thank you. And thank you, Jessica and Chris, for your tour of the refined conceptual design. Looking ahead, all right, what comes next? To summarize, we're meeting here tonight for our third public meeting. And over the next few weeks, we will kind of have an opportunity for online comments and through an online survey for the project, where we'll also be posting the conceptual designs online. We'd love to hear from you. And then by the end of June, we will have completed our final conceptual design report, and we'll submit that to DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, for consideration of adopting the project in their capital plan. We've created a one-stop shop for all project materials. That is mysticriver.org /Mystic Lakes Path. In the coming days, we will be posting project materials, including tonight's recording and presentation for your review, and we will be launching an online survey. Because we are wrapping up our report, we are kindly requesting all thoughts and comments to be submitted by Friday, June 21st. Yes, so please have a look at that, and our contact information is also going to be available on the project website as well. Oh, so with that in mind, I'll bump out. We forgot to put in our Q&A discussion slide in the presentation. So here we go. We'd like to open up for Q&A discussion. We'll have, we'll have an opportunity for folks to now raise your hand. And when we call upon you, we will unmute you and ask yourself to speak. Please do be considerate of the amount of time speaking to allow for others to be able to comment as well. If raised hands are infrequent, we'll also turn to Isaiah for maybe some additional written comments or questions coming in. Let's see here. First, we have Mark Breslow.
I've got a question about the material making up the paths. I'm particularly concerned that there be some amount of paths that are not pavement, because I have trouble walking and running on pavement too much of the time. And, most of the paths that are around are just pavement. But some of them are stone dust. For example, the section of path between Alewife Station going north along Route 16 is stone dust. And I wonder whether, since you're allowing 12 feet for the multi-use path, whether you could make a portion of those 12 feet be stone dust. Just have 2 feet or 4 feet of it be stone dust on one side of it, which would allow people to walk or to run on something softer than pavement. And so that's my question, whether you could do that, especially because I noticed that there's only 2,600 feet of secondary path that you're keeping, which is only half a mile of it. So I'm wondering if you could have more stone dust.
Great, thank you, Mark. That's a really, really great question. I can, I add one question that I think might help out is, are there any buffers? So it's a 12-foot path. Are there any planned edge buffers that could potentially be stone dust or another material on each side of that 12-foot path?
Yeah, well, I can speak to that quickly, Carl. So I think, yeah, best practice for shared use path design is to have a 2-foot graded shoulder on either side of the path. So there should be, in our recommendations, there will be a 2-foot graded shoulder on each side of the path. And that could be proposed to be a material that would be kind of runnable or walkable or otherwise traversable on foot.
Right. And you know, to add upon that, there are certainly trade-offs for, you know, paved asphalt compared to an organic block or a stabilized aggregate stone dust. We've discussed these with DCR, and we're actually not going to be providing a recommendation for the 12-foot multi-use path as a result of those trade-offs, and allow them to be able to consider the operations of those paths. For a 2-mile stretch too, stone dust with on the slopes that we're looking at really does need to be installed correctly, unless otherwise it risks really degrading quickly. So that is certainly an option that that 12-foot multi-use path may be a stabilized aggregate. Still, it's just not, we're not making that decision at this point in time. Great. Well, thank you, Mark. See here. Are there any other raised hands? I believe I saw, was it Bruce Alexander who raised their hands briefly and then unraised?
Yes, I did unraise my hand because I think your last comment answered it. I was going to ask about permeable, you know, asphalt or permeable pavement, but I think you're not deciding that yet.
Yeah, there are some DCR facilities that do have permeable pavement as well, and that's certainly something that could be explored. It does go down to their comfort zone in terms of, again, like ongoing operations. A lot of the time, a lot of permeable pavement needs to be vacuum sweet, certain types. But there are like really good precedents in the region for permeable pavement as well, which would certainly also help with stormwater too. And there's a little bit of a better balance. Thanks, Bruce.
I can elevate a few questions that came up in the chat that we didn't get to. One is around the lighting and whether, I guess, thinking about the wiring for it, whether it will be underground wiring.
So would anyone else like to answer this? I need to recall a conversation we had with DCR. I believe we were going to look at burying it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe it would be underground conduit, consistent with the lighting that is currently out on the Winchester side.
Question about whether we're thinking about incorporating trash barrels.
Again, in an ideal scenario, we'd be proposing trash barrels be, you know, placed at any picnicking area. You know, I think you know, trash and litter is very much a topic of discussion, and you know, at Shannon Beach and at the lakes, especially during peak season. And so making sure that there's an appropriate, you know, that wherever, you know, we are proposing for people to really gather and congregate where food is involved, food and beverage, that there be appropriate, you know, places for trash to be removed. And that decision on a few of those locations, like we provided locations for like picnicking / seating. And so for areas that might not be appropriate or DCR might not feel comfortable providing for trash pickup, that might be more seating. And others, though, where they could include it in their operations, might lean more towards picnicking. So a lot of those decisions might be at a later stage, especially when it comes to the placement of trash receptacles. There's an operational element to that as well.
And then going back a little ways, there were a couple of clarifying questions about what the changes are going to look like to the intersection of the Mystic Valley Parkway and Bacon Street, and how, what those changes might look like.
I could talk to that. So we are not currently making any final recommendations for this intersection configuration. We've had a conversation with the town of Winchester and kind of some of the things that they might want to see at this intersection. And we are kind of moving forward with 3 proposed reconfigurations, essentially a stop controlled intersection like you see today, where we kind of keep the same control, but we tighten up the curb lines to kind of slow vehicles as they're going through. The other would be the introduction of a traffic signal, and then the third would be a roundabout. So we'll kind of be bringing in different considerations for each of these intersection alternatives to be considered more in preliminary engineering of the roadway. But yeah, we did not have kind of the data that we needed to make a final decision on that intersection configuration quite yet.
And I'll just mention I've had a few questions about things like snow removal, who's going to be doing the trash cleanup, and I think those are sort of, again, some DCR operations questions that would be, I think, considered as we pass these designs along to DCR. Does that sound accurate, Carl?
Yeah, one piece of information I'll share is that the DCR contacts we spoke with, and this doesn't mean that it won't change at a later date with whatever's constructed here. But the path isn't currently intended to be included in their snow removal procedures. The areas around the Wedgemere MBTA station might be included up to the Everett Bridge. But those type of operational decisions, though, I would love to see snow removal on the path year round. But yeah, those type of operational decisions will be made by DCR once we produce the final report and hand it back over to them. Martha.
Yeah, thank you. I know you're not answering operations questions, and I did tune in a little late, but you have a lot of picnic tables shown on this plan. And I'm wondering, and also some swimming areas that aren't swimming areas now, for example, across from, let's see, at the lower end of the lower Mystic Lake. So I was interested if, yeah, that one. If you're
Yep.
planning amenities for that location, I see also there's parking there, so. I mean, there's just not a lot of area there for things like traffic and parking, so I'm curious how that will work.
Yep. Yeah, it's good to see you, Martha. So that icon is actually a canoe kayak launch rather than swimming. Just to clarify. So the only like designated swimming area that would include lifeguards and everything still remains at Shannon Beach. And to the previous comment regarding trash and litter, I would consider the picnic/seating area icon as quite literally as picnic or seating. So some of these locations might be scenic bench locations that where DCR might prefer not to do trash collection or pickup. And then others might be more of a picnic location. So we're identifying these locations now, but it'll ultimately be their decision in terms of which, how to code or place these locations. And I can envision through, DCR's lens of wanting to concentrate those uses and where litter might really be generated. Similar to how, similar to like really concentrating that use to Shannon Beach. So totally understand that concern as well. Our hope as well by providing very designated areas for recreation, it will allow the rest of the shoreline to remain conserved. That would help to hopefully reduce erosion, degradation, litter in unwanted other locations that are currently unprogrammed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you're showing a kayak launch, it's going to turn into a jet ski launch in a truck parking spot pretty quickly, in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good feedback to maybe consider some adjustments to that.
Another question is, are we thinking about introducing no swimming signs at locations other than Shannon Beach?
Again, I don't mean to pass the hat. However, that is related to DCR's capacity to staff lifeguards, monitor water quality in certain locations. And so I don't know what their regulation is around the placement of no swimming signage, but I think that might be a really good recommendation to provide though for the kayak put in locations and where access to the water is very is made more accessible through this conceptual design.
I think those are the big ones that I've got in the chat. And I'm sorry if I missed your comments. We have them all recorded, and we'll follow up with a summary of questions that were asked.
Great. Well, we have 1 more minute, so want to give an opportunity for anyone else or general comments or feedback. As I mentioned, and I'll go back to the slide with contact information here.
You know, we had one more come in, which is,
Okay.
could we talk a little bit about what are existing areas that won't be touched by this project? Which maybe is going back to the scope at the beginning.
Oh yeah. Sorry to flip back and forth here. So, you know, really, I mean, like there's some opportunity for some shoreline restoration, especially at the narrow sections immediately adjacent to the path. However, the peninsulas that you see that jut out into the lakes, you know, any location where an amenity site wasn't proposed, won't particularly be touched, quote unquote, like by this project. There may be an opportunity for like invasive species removal or vegetative management to allow for native plant proliferation. But those are largely going to be like untouched from like a recreational aspect as part of this scope work. All right, so just a reminder, our website will host the project information for the next couple weeks, mysticriver.org/Mystic Lakes Path, including tonight's recording and presentation. We will be having an online survey there to share feedbacks as well as high quality resolutions of the conceptual designs for your review. And with that as well, wanted to put our emails up here. Our offices are located in Arlington Center. So if you'd like to stop by or reach out via email, we'd be happy to connect with you as we finish up our work here in the coming weeks. So with that, want to thank you so much for joining this evening. If you do have any final questions or comments, we'll be sticking on, but otherwise you're all set to sign off. So thank you so much for joining again, and hope to see you outside at the lake soon. Take care.
If folks